what would the effect upon our culture or society be, do you think? And secondly, do you think it's even possible that that'll ever happen?
Well, I'd be very surprised if it does for a number of theological reasons, but that's getting into another area. I think, see, this raises another issue well, first of all, to the general public, of course, it would have the obvious shock effect. It also would allow people who are skeptical to embrace a theology of their own design. But what it would have for someone that has a biblical perspective, it would cause a re-examination of the possibility of a gap between the first two verses of Genesis, the so-called gap theory. It would get into the whole issue of the fall of Satan and what the judgments that accompanied that. Jeremiah 4 and Isaiah 45 and 48 in that range have impact on this. There is a view that is held by a minority of authorities of what's sometimes called the gap theory. It would tend to illuminate that perhaps, but I think you see that the root problem that the theologian has with that is that if there's other life in the universe, is it sinful or not? And you have a problem in either direction. If there's sinless life in the world, that has a question, and if there's sinful life elsewhere in the world, that has a redemptive question. So it raises some very, very interesting paradoxes in the theology of it all. But I would wait until I see that. But I'd be very guarded because I for other reasons, anticipate a great deal of deceit. This leads to another root thing that we should understand. When you look at Carl Sagan's novel, The Contact, a very colorful, very cleverly written piece of work. There, of course, they encounter a set of communications that they then validate by their various techniques, prime numbers and all that, from extra. He builds a novel around the discovery of extraterrestrial communication. You see, that happened in my life in a way, because the great discovery, my professional identity and depth is in the information sciences. Very early in my life, I came to two discoveries in my life that changed my life. One was that the 66 books that we call the Bible, I discovered that they evidence deliberate design. I don't mean thematically. I mean, I came to the view, I've discovered every number, every place, and every detail of these, even though these 66 books are written by over 40 guys over almost 2,000 years, there's evidence that every detail in them is there by deliberate design. Once you discover that, then you're confronted with a second aspect of that. The origin of that design had to come from outside our time domain, because with a precision that's absolutely amazing, it writes history before it happens. And so I get so frustrated when I hear well-meaning people on the main media say, you can't prove the Bible, but. That's even if they're trying to support the Bible, say, well, you can't prove it, but, and then they go on to make their point. I always get frustrated because you can. You can demonstrate that every detail is there by pre-design, and I got dozens of examples of that. And if that's true, the point is you can actually demonstrate with the same clarity that Carl Sagan posed in his novel, Contact. The same kind of thing you can demonstrate that these 66 books that we're in possession of were deliberately designed. Now, the most astonishing book about the anthropic principle comes from Gonzalez and these guys, who discovered not only have we discovered that the universe appears to be designed for man, we discovered it's been designed to be discovered. The peculiar mathematics, for example, between the Earth, the Sun, and so forth that gives rise to a solar eclipse is so precise, without which we would not have discovered spectroscopy, which of course we now discover that we're in the exact position in the galaxies in order for us to discover the rest. The Privileged Planet is their DVD. They also have done a book on it. That was really they, in my mind, have made a major discovery epistemologically. That this is a way to it has huge implications in terms of our understanding of what's really true. The point I'm getting at is that all these tests that we talk about with SETI and the Drake formula, if you apply the same kind of thinking to the 66 books we call the Bible, you're in for a astonishing surprise, because you can demonstrate that every detail in there is anticipatory of the rest.
So let me ask you. So let me ask you a question about this. Does the Bible have anything to say about these extraterrestrial intelligences that we are trying to peel the lid back on tonight. Some people believe that these this so-called extraterrestrial contact, both ancient and modern, is actually related to something the Bible deals with, these ancient beings known as the Watchers. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I think so. I think we've got to go there very cautiously, but I do so. I think the real root of understanding comes out of Genesis chapter 6, where we have these fallen angels contrived to create hybrids, half human, and those hybrids are embodied in all our mythology of ancient people, as typified by the Greek examples. The point is, you really won't understand the Old Testament unless you realize that certain tribes, God told Joshua to wipe out certain tribes, every man, woman, child. You read that as a New Testament reader, and it's shocking. And unless you understand there was the whole flood of Noah issue was an issue of a gene pool problem created by these intrusions. And so, and that sounds pretty spooky until you get to the New Testament. Both Second Peter, and also the book of Jude corroborate that perspective. So, the so-called angel view of Genesis 6 is a foundational issue. And what's amazing is that is not taught in most of our seminaries. When we came out with the book Alien Encounters, I got some calls from people who are senior executives in publishing houses that were really angry, not at me, but they had graduate degrees in theology, and they realized in their entire seminary background they didn't even know of the existence of that view, because it's taught. There's a counter view called the Sethite view, which is about in 12 different ways non-biblical, and I won't start on that. Except the point is, what they were said about is it wasn't as if they in seminaries said, here are the different views and here's where we favor this one. No, they didn't even teach the existence of the so-called angel view, which, if you take the Bible seriously, is what it actually says. If you take it seriously, that's what it says, and it has implications. So the point, what I'm getting at is that the Genesis 6, the angel view of Genesis 6 is just a piece of the puzzle, but it's a critical piece in terms of recognizing that from a biblical perspective, there are not only demons and hostile creatures of some kind, but there's also hybrids that are part of our history. And the reason that's so relevant is because Jesus himself makes reference to the fact that as the days of Noah were, so shall the days of the coming of the Son of Man be. In other words, if you start studying eschatology, the study of the last things, you discover that if you're going to study it carefully, you've got to make allowance for some of these remarks, which imply that the conditions that preceded Noah's flood are conditions that we will see reemerge again. And so that's one of the reasons that this whole area of UFOs and what have you is a relevant area of inquiry for people who do take the Bible seriously. And that's, again, that leads to why we undertook to do the book. Dr. Eastman and I did the Alien Encounters book for that reason. But our initial targeted goal was the biblical reader, not the, we broadened the horizon for obvious reasons because it turned out to be very fruitful to do that. But we regard that as a critical background. You will not understand the Old Testament unless you really understand Genesis 6, and I don't think you really fully appreciate what Jesus is saying in Matthew 24 unless you understand Genesis 6. So Genesis 6 turns out to be a key part of it.
One of the supporting things, of course, that I also found, and we don't place anything on a par with the Bible, with the authority of the Bible, but all of the extra biblical texts, the pseudepigraphical, all of these ancient records support the angel theory, and you'll never find anything in there that's supporting the Sethite view. So for me, that also meant that there was a general consensus of ancient knowledge that understood what had happened, and it was in support of the biblical record. The English theologian George Hawkins Pember has a 1876 masterpiece, Earth's Earliest Ages. He broke down the days of Noah prophecy, and he said that the final thing would be the return of the spirits of the Nephilim, the appearance upon earth of beings from the principality of the air, their unlawful intercourse with the human race. Was this an early vision of what, like some kind of an alien invasion of the earth, a reemergence of the same spirits that probably are involved with what many people in the study of alien abduction phenomenon are looking at? I want to get your quick answers on these. We got about three minutes, and then we're going to have to bring you back because we absolutely are just in the middle of the fire now.